It began in the summer of 1977. Under the searing glare of Hollywood's spotlight, Charlie's Angels was the most talked-about show on television, a shimmering fantasy of beauty, danger, and independence. But behind that glossy veneer, the set was tense, uncertain. Farrah Fawcett had just left the series, leaving a vacancy no one thought could be filled. Then came Cheryl Ladd, radiant, 26, and walking straight into the storm. Across from her stood Kate Jackson, the original Angel, sharp-witted, fiercely principled, and unyielding in her pursuit of perfection. The press called them rivals before they even met. Whispers spread through studio corridors that Kate resented the newcomer, that Cheryl was too cheerful, too willing to play along. But decades later, Cheryl Ladd finally told the truth. The story wasn't one of jealousy or betrayal. It was about respect misunderstood, silence mistaken for animosity, and the quiet bond that grew between two women who refused to be diminished by Hollywood's expectations. What Kate Jackson did to Cheryl Ladd wasn't cruel, it was unforgettable. And when the truth finally surfaced, fans saw the women behind the wings, not adversaries but survivors. When Cheryl Ladd first walked onto the Charlie's Angels set in 1977, she carried a weight no newcomer should bear. She wasn't just joining a hit show, she was replacing its most iconic face. Farrah Fawcett had become a phenomenon overnight, her smile a symbol of an era. To step into that void was an act of courage, or madness, depending on who you asked. Producers pinned their hopes on Cheryl's charm, her disarming mix of girl-next-door warmth and undeniable glamour. Kate Jackson, by contrast, was already the soul of the series. A trained actress with years of television experience, she had fought to give Charlie's Angels more depth than its scripts often allowed. She was the thinker among the trio, grounded, commanding, sometimes impatient with Hollywood's shallow games. When Cheryl arrived, she entered Kate's domain, a world defined by ambition, exhaustion, and unrelenting scrutiny. From the start, the tension wasn't personal. It was structural. The show's success had turned its stars into commodities. The network marketed them as fashion dolls while demanding the work ethic of soldiers. For women in 1970s Hollywood, this was the price of visibility. They smiled through exhaustion, delivered lines under impossible schedules, and learned to hide frustration behind camera-ready poise. Cheryl Ladd's debut as Chris Monroe in the second season immediately reignited ratings, proving that the show's appeal was larger than any single star. Kate Jackson had already established herself as the creative voice of the cast, often clashing with producers to demand better scripts and more realistic portrayals of women. Behind the scenes, Jackson was known for mentoring younger actresses, not with softness, but with honesty. What the tabloids called coldness was in truth Kate's armor. She believed in standards. She believed the show could be more than glamour and gunfights. Cheryl, eager to earn her place, often found herself on the receiving end of Kate's directness. It was intimidating at first, the older star's quiet corrections, her insistence that every moment mattered. But Cheryl later admitted that those lessons shaped her craft. In those early months, Cheryl's days began before dawn and ended in the dark. She studied scripts, practiced choreography, and navigated an industry eager to compare her to the woman she'd replaced. Farrah's shadow loomed large, but it was Kate's presence that defined Cheryl's reality. There were no outbursts, no feuds, just a quiet friction born from two different survival instincts. Kate, fighting to preserve her integrity in an industry that commodified her. Cheryl, fighting to prove she deserved to stand beside her. Reports from the time noted that Charlie's Angels was filmed under punishing hours, up to 16-hour days, 5 days a week. Cheryl often performed her own stunts, eager to prove her dedication to the role. Kate, exhausted by the pace, was simultaneously working on side projects and seeking creative outlets beyond the show. Their interactions were professional, distant perhaps, but threaded with an unspoken recognition. Two women navigating fame's fragile ecosystem. Years later, when Cheryl spoke of that period, her tone wasn't bitter, it was grateful. She remembered how Kate's seriousness pushed her to elevate her own work. She remembered how, beneath the guarded exterior, there was kindness, rare and unpublicized. The truth was never about rivalry. It was about two women who refused to be simplified. Fame, once bright and thrilling, soon began to show its sharper edges. For Cheryl Ladd, the early glow of success came with a weight she hadn't anticipated. She had been welcomed into millions of homes each week, her smile a symbol of optimism and energy, but behind that image was an actress learning to survive the unforgiving rhythm of primetime television. Every scene had to sparkle, every close-up had to convince. The world didn't see the exhaustion that followed her home each night, or the quiet anxiety of being measured against someone else's memory. Kate Jackson, already worn from the industry's demands, began to feel those same pressures pressing harder than ever. Her commitment to quality storytelling was colliding with a machine more interested in ratings than authenticity. She had entered Charlie's Angels wanting to make a difference, to portray women as intelligent and capable, but by its second season, the studio's focus had turned more toward image and glamour. She pushed back, sometimes clashing with producers, sometimes retreating into silence. It wasn't ego, it was fatigue, and it showed in her body and her spirit. Cheryl saw it happening. While the press painted Kate as moody or difficult, Cheryl saw something different. A woman burdened by expectations, trying to protect the heart of something she believed in. What many misread as coldness was often Kate's way of coping with disappointment. She carried the responsibility of being the show's moral compass, and that kind of responsibility is lonely. By 1978, Charlie's Angels was one of the highest-rated shows on television, reaching the top 5 of the Nielsen charts. Its success brought enormous visibility, but also unrelenting pressure. The production schedule was relentless, shooting 5 days a week, often for 12, 14 hours at a stretch, with little time for personal life. Kate Jackson, balancing that workload, also underwent health struggles during the late 1970s. She had previously survived a major operation and would later battle breast cancer, though she kept her challenges private at the time. As Cheryl settled into her role, she began to sense how fame could isolate even the strongest. She found herself defending Kate in interviews, softening the public's perception of their working relationship. Off-camera, moments of quiet understanding emerged, a shared look, a brief laugh between takes, or a conversation that revealed how deeply both women wanted to be respected for their craft, not just admired for their appearance. Hollywood, however, thrived on conflict. Rumors of discord between the Angels were far more profitable than stories of camaraderie. Every tabloid headline drew lines where none existed, feeding the illusion that women could not coexist in success. The truth was less dramatic and more human: exhaustion, pride, ambition, all mixing in the crucible of a hit show. Despite the gossip, Cheryl Ladd and Kate Jackson maintained mutual respect. In later years, Cheryl consistently credited Kate for her professionalism and influence, describing her as a brilliant actress whose intensity elevated the show. But by 1979, cracks had begun to show. Kate was feeling the toll of constant work and creative frustration. She began to question whether Charlie's Angels still reflected the kind of stories she wanted to tell. Meanwhile, Cheryl, ever the optimist, was fighting to keep the show's spirit alive, taking on more emotional storylines and helping to redefine what it meant to be an angel. What unfolded wasn't betrayal, but transition, the quiet, inevitable shift that happens when two strong people stand at different crossroads. Cheryl had come into her own, and Kate, recognizing that, began to step away from the series. In 1979, after 3 seasons, Kate Jackson officially left Charlie's Angels to pursue other creative opportunities. Her departure marked the end of the original trio dynamic and signaled the beginning of a new chapter in television. one where female-driven stories would continue to evolve. For Cheryl, the loss was bittersweet. She had found her place, but it came with the absence of the woman who had helped her find it. For Kate, the exit was a reclaiming of peace, a chance to rediscover purpose outside the pressures of weekly television. By the time the cameras stopped rolling on that final season together, what remained between them wasn't resentment or rivalry. It was something far quieter, far stronger, the kind of mutual respect that outlasts fame itself. When Kate Jackson stepped away from Charlie's Angels, it marked more than a cast change. It was the end of an era. The show that had once symbolized female empowerment and camaraderie now stood at a crossroads, learning to evolve without one of its brightest lights. For Cheryl Ladd, the transition was both professional and personal. She had stepped into a space first defined by others, and now she was helping to redefine it entirely. But even as the new seasons unfolded, the absence of Kate lingered quietly, like a familiar song fading into memory. Kate Jackson's departure in 1979 came after creative disagreements and exhaustion from the show's intense schedule. She went on to star in Scarecrow and Mrs. King, a critically acclaimed series that earned her multiple Golden Globe and Emmy nominations. Her decision to leave Charlie's Angels was not rebellion, but renewal, an artist's instinct to follow a new calling. For Cheryl, meanwhile, the success of Charlie's Angels continued through the early 80s. Her role as Chris Monroe had transformed from the new girl to the emotional anchor of the show. She brought warmth and humor that audiences connected with deeply. Yet even as the spotlight brightened, Cheryl often found herself reflecting on the dynamics that had shaped her journey. Fame was fleeting, but the lessons she learned from working alongside women like Kate stayed permanent. Cheryl Ladd remained on the series until its conclusion in 1981. Appearing in over 80 episodes. During that time, she also began a successful recording career, releasing several albums that showcased her vocal talent. Her ability to balance both acting and music mirrored the resilience that defined her career. In later interviews, Cheryl often spoke of those years, not as rivalry but as growth. The gossip that once tried to pit the Angels against each other had faded, replaced by recognition of how groundbreaking the show truly was. It had opened doors for women in action television, paving the way for future generations of actresses who could be both strong and vulnerable, glamorous, yet grounded. Charlie's Angels inspired countless successors in the decades that followed, from Cagney and Lacey in the 80s to the film adaptations in the 2000s, cementing its place as a cultural milestone in women-led television. As the years passed, Cheryl and Kate's paths occasionally crossed at industry events, and though the world imagined distance, there was no animosity. What remained between them was quiet acknowledgement, the kind that only time and mutual respect can preserve. By the late 1990s, Cheryl Ladd had transitioned into film and stage work, earning praise for her performances in Grace Kelly and A Smile Like Yours. Kate Jackson, after her successful run on Scarecrow and Mrs. King, continued to advocate for breast cancer awareness following her diagnosis in 1987, using her platform to educate and inspire others. For fans who had grown up watching them, the passing decades added tenderness to their story. What once looked like friction now read as two women navigating the same storm differently. Both had carried the weight of public scrutiny, and both had emerged with grace intact. In retrospective interviews and documentaries, Cheryl Ladd consistently described Kate Jackson as a pioneer, a perfectionist and a visionary who cared deeply about the integrity of the show. Kate, in turn, credited the ensemble for helping shape one of television's most memorable eras. Their shared legacy became clearer with time. Every rerun of Charlie's Angels served as a reminder of how their combined strengths had defined the show's heart. Cheryl's optimism balanced Kate's seriousness. Kate's intensity grounded Cheryl's light. Together they captured something real: the complexity of women working side by side in a world that often expected competition instead of collaboration. In 2010, when Charlie's Angels was honored as one of television's most iconic shows at the TV Land Awards, Cheryl Ladd reflected on how those early years changed her life forever. Though Kate Jackson did not attend, her name drew the same reverence and applause, proof that time had not diminished her influence. And perhaps that is the truest measure of their story. It wasn't defined by the rumors or the headlines, but by what endured long after the cameras stopped rolling. A shared chapter in television history that continues to inspire generations of women to claim their own space, to stand tall, and to treat one another not as rivals, but as reflections of the same fight for respect. The world remembers the Angels for their beauty and glamour, but the real story was always about strength. Cheryl Ladd and Kate Jackson didn't just portray women who could do anything, they lived it. Time has a way of softening the edges of old stories. What once felt sharp and urgent fades into memory, leaving only the truth that mattered most. For Cheryl Ladd and Kate Jackson, the years that followed Charlie's Angels became less about what was lost and more about what had been built, a legacy that no misunderstanding could erase. After Charlie's Angels, Cheryl and Kate pursued very different paths, but remained fixtures of American television. Cheryl found success in both drama and comedy, appearing in Las Vegas and Angels Fall, while Kate earned renewed admiration for her advocacy work and continued appearances in made-for-TV films throughout the 1990s. Both women became role models for balance, proof that fame need not define fulfillment. The public often imagined their relationship frozen in time, two women standing on opposite sides of fame's mirror. But the truth, like most human stories, was gentler. When they did reconnect, it wasn't through headlines or interviews but through quiet gestures. Industry colleagues recalled moments at charity galas or tributes where a glance or shared smile said what words could not. They had outgrown the noise, the tabloids, the exaggerated narratives. What remained was a respect born of shared experience, the unspoken bond of two women who had survived Hollywood's most demanding decade. In 2006, Charlie's Angels celebrated its 30th anniversary with renewed appreciation. Media retrospectives and fan conventions began reframing the show not just as pop entertainment, but as a turning point in television history, one that placed women at the forefront of action, intelligence, and independence. Cheryl, who participated in several of these commemorations, often emphasized that none of it would have existed without Kate's early influence. As Cheryl revisited her past through interviews and memoirs, she began to speak openly about the weight of comparison she carried early on. What had once felt like rivalry now revealed itself as reflection. The tension between two artists who wanted to be seen, respected, and understood. Looking back, she could see how much of her strength had been forged in that fire. In her 2005 autobiography, Token Chick, A Woman's Guide to Golfing with the Boys, Cheryl reflected on her career with gratitude rather than grievance. She described her time on Charlie's Angels as transformative and credited her co-stars for shaping her resilience and empathy. Kate, too, had reached a place of peace. Though she retreated from the public eye in her later years, those who knew her spoke of her deep appreciation for the fans who never forgot her work. She took quiet pride in knowing that Charlie's Angels had outlasted the headlines, that its heart had survived through countless retellings. By the late 2000s, Kate Jackson was living a quieter life, focusing on health and personal fulfillment. She appeared occasionally for interviews and special retrospectives, offering reflections on how groundbreaking the series had been for women in television. In time, the story of Cheryl and Kate became less about conflict and more about continuity. The younger actresses who followed in the 2000 film adaptation starring Cameron Diaz, Drew Barrymore, and Lucy Liu often cited the original cast as their inspiration. Cheryl publicly praised these successors, reminding fans that the spirit of the Angels was not tied to any one era, but to the courage of women who dared to take the lead. Both Cheryl Ladd and Kate Jackson were honored for their contributions to television at various industry events and retrospectives, with Cheryl receiving the TV Land Pop Culture Award alongside her castmates in 2010. The tribute acknowledged not only the show's entertainment value but its role in advancing female representation on screen. As time wove its quiet threads through their separate lives, the emotional distance that once defined them gave way to gratitude. They had shared something few ever could, the rare alchemy of creation, pressure, and triumph that leaves a permanent mark. When Cheryl reflected on her journey in later interviews, she described Charlie's Angels as a gift wrapped in lessons, emphasizing how much she had learned from every woman on set. She often credited Kate's example as a guide in navigating her own later projects. And so what began as a story of competition ended as one of recognition. The truth was never about who shone brighter, but how both women carried the light forward. The show may have ended decades ago, but its echoes remain, in the courage of women who saw themselves in those angels, and in the quiet legacy of two actresses who turned tension into transformation. Decades later, the light of Charlie's Angels still glows in pop culture's memory, a mirror of an era when three women stepped into a genre once ruled by men and changed everything. For Cheryl Ladd and Kate Jackson, that light never dimmed. It simply softened, becoming something purer, a legacy woven from courage, vulnerability, and grace. Since the show's debut in 1976, Charlie's Angels has been remade, referenced, and reimagined across generations. From the blockbuster 2000 film starring Cameron Diaz, Drew Barrymore, and Lucy Liu, to the 2019 reboot featuring Kristen Stewart and Naomi Scott, every new version has paid tribute to the original trio who started it all. Farrah Fawcett, Kate Jackson, and Jaclyn Smith, later joined by Cheryl Ladd. Each incarnation carried a piece of the original's DNA, women who could be strong and soft, glamorous yet grounded, fierce yet kind. For Cheryl, watching new generations of actresses embody the angels became an act of quiet pride. She once said in an interview that Charlie's Angels was never just about the action, it was about possibility. The possibility that women could lead, decide, and shine without apology. It was a show that told little girls they didn't have to be rescued. They could be the ones holding the map. Cheryl Ladd's career continued to evolve beyond the shadow of the angels. She became an accomplished singer, author, and Broadway performer, starring in Annie Get Your Gun and later in Love, Life and Murder. She also became a national spokesperson for child abuse prevention, using her platform to advocate for causes that mirrored the compassion she brought to her roles. Kate Jackson, though she chose a quieter life, remained revered by fans and industry peers alike. Her later work in Scarecrow and Mrs. King, which earned her 3 Emmy nominations, reminded audiences that her talent was as resilient as her presence. Even as she stepped away from the spotlight, she carried herself with the same sharp intelligence and quiet defiance that had defined her earliest days on set. Jackson's decision to step back from acting in the 2000s was influenced by her ongoing health challenges and a desire for personal peace. Yet her influence lingered. Both Cheryl and Jaclyn Smith have spoken publicly about how much her strength and humor shaped their own lives long after the cameras stopped rolling. What truly endures, however, is not just the fame but the feeling that Cheryl and Kate left behind. In fan conventions, online tributes, and television retrospectives, their names are spoken not just with nostalgia, but with affection. Viewers still recall the chemistry between them, the intelligence in Kate's gaze, the light in Cheryl's smile, as if these moments were carved into time itself. Charlie's Angels was one of the first shows to feature women solving crimes without relying on male authority figures. It broke ground in ratings and representation, earning over 30 million weekly viewers at its peak and cementing its place in television history as a pioneer for female-driven storytelling. Cheryl often says the real magic wasn't in the scripts, but in the sisterhood that bloomed on set, even when it was complicated, even when the world tried to turn it into rivalry. Behind every camera flash, behind every rumor, there were shared laughs, late-night conversations, and quiet understanding. And that, more than any headline, is what time has preserved. When Charlie's Angels was honored with the TV Land Pop Culture Award in 2010, Cheryl accepted it with grace, paying tribute to all her co-stars, including Kate. She called the moment a full-circle blessing, acknowledging how far the Angels had flown, not just on screen, but in the hearts of those who grew up with them. Now, as Cheryl reflects at 71, her tone is soft but steady. She no longer speaks of comparison or competition, only gratitude. "We were all part of something bigger than ourselves," she once said. "We gave people hope, and that sips the kind of legacy that lasts." And so, when fans ask what Kate Jackson did to Cheryl Ladd, the truth is not what tabloids once imagined. What Kate did was challenge her, inspire her, and ultimately teach her what resilience looks like. Their story was never about division. It was about two women growing into their power, side by side, under the same unforgiving light. Kate Jackson's quiet influence can still be felt in modern television, from strong female leads in procedural dramas to complex portrayals of women balancing strength and vulnerability. Many showrunners and actresses cite her performance as a blueprint for how to make female intelligence the center of a story, not a side note. Together they left behind something far greater than fame, a promise that women could define their own stories, and in that promise, Cheryl and Kate found their peace. In the end, Cheryl Ladd and Kate Jackson's story was never about rivalry, it was about evolution. What began as tension under studio lights became, through time, a quiet form of mutual respect. They had walked through the fire of fame, each finding her own truth on the other side. When Cheryl speaks of those days now, her words carry no bitterness, only grace. She honors Kate not as a competitor, but as a woman who helped shape her courage. And for fans who once watched them chase down villains in heels and perfect hair, the truer victory was always behind the scenes, two women daring to stand tall in a world that often preferred them silent. Their legacy endures not in reruns, but in every woman who learned that strength can coexist with kindness, and ambition with heart. For more emotional stories, check out this video.